So a few people have messaged me and asked me how I landed the gig to write Green Street. And it's a fair question, bearing in mind that up to that time I was an author and I was turning out books like these up here. And I've spoken about this before in interviews and stuff like that, but it is, you've asked, so I'll explain. Back then, in 2003, 2004, we're talking about, the internet was a relatively new thing still, bizarre though that may seem. And hooliganism was still a big thing. Certainly on the hooligan world, the whole retro thing was massive. And there was lots of internet forums, the secret forums, where lads would go and talk about the good old days and club rivalries. And some were used to set stuff up. There's no denying that. And the police were starting to wise up to that. And there was one in particular called In the Know, which is the most famous one, ITK. And indeed, I named the third book in the Crew Top Dog trilogy. I named it In the Know in deference to that website. It was a great website, really was. But at that time, the people were wary, and we were thinking the journalists and the police are watching. And they were, to be fair. And so most of us were using fake names on there. Now, my name was Burko Ladd. Most people who were around at that time knew that. And then one night, I get a private message from somebody and say, look, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's some bird trawling around talking about she wants to make a movie about the scene. So I said, oh, okay, well, I'll dig around. And I dug her out. And she'd been posting everywhere, asking for advice, and she wanted to do this and she wanted to do that. So I dropped her a line, and eventually she messaged me back using my fake name. And we got chatting, and I dropped some nuggets in there, and she said, you're exactly the sort of person I need to talk to and to help me with this. So I said, oh, all right, okay. And I kind of inferred certain things, that I was something different, shall we say? Not that I was an author. And after a few months, I said to her, look, you should speak to this guy, it's Dougie Brimson guy. He's written loads of books about all this stuff. And she said, no, I don't want to speak to him. And I said, why not? She said, oh, well, I've heard lots about his books, that they're not this and they're not that, and that he's a bit of a prick and all this. And I said, well, fair enough. So I carried on talking to her to amuse myself. But it was starting to get serious then. She was clearly serious about doing it. And so in the end, I said, look, you need to speak to Dougie Brimson again. You need to speak to him, because he knows stuff I wouldn't know, and he can help you with this, And she fought against it. But in the end, she said, I've already spoken to him. And I think she obviously wanted to shut me up. Well, I knew she hadn't spoken to him at all, because he was me. And I said, in my Burko Ladd persona, well, fair enough. So we carried on talking, and she was like trying to develop this plot line. And again, I pushed her toward Dougie Brimson. And I think she was getting pissed off at me. And in the end, she made contact with me. And we got on like a house on fire, largely because I already knew what she wanted to do. So I was kind of, oh, yes, it's a good idea. What about this? What about that? And there's stuff she'd already suggested to me in my other persona. And in the end, we were knocking this plot out. And she said, look, this is crazy. Why don't you just fly out to Hollywood and we'll work on the script for like a week or so. So I obtained permission off the boss, Mrs. Brim. And flew out, and we got on like a house on fire. And one night we were in the Hard Rock Cafe in Los Angeles, and I said, look, I've got something I need to tell you, because you're going to find out one day. She said, oh, what's that? And I said, you were talking to this guy Burko Ladd. And she said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, that was me. You were talking to me all along. Now, bearing in mind that Lexi Alexander is a former world kickboxing champion, and I think it's safe to say that she went fucking mad. And I thought I could be in proper danger here. But she soon calmed down, and, you know, I wouldn't say she laughed about it, but we kind of got over it and bashed the script into shape. And then this went backwards and forwards, and then I went back out there. I took my missus with me this time. And while we were there, she showed us the script to a short movie she was working on, a movie called Johnny Flinton. And she was a bit hesitant about doing it, and she'd rewritten it loads of times. And we read it, and I said, we both, Tina and I, just said, look, just make the fucking thing, you know. Because up until that time, she'd done some stuff, but she hadn't kind of made that leap, if you like. So she made Johnny Flinton, and a little while later, about a year or so later, I suppose, it was nominated for an Oscar. Now, that's a massive deal in America. It's massive, it's huge, you know. And so people are throwing money at her. And of course, the next project, I've got this hooligan movie. It's called Green Street. Green Street Hooligans in America. Now, at this point, I will say, the reason I called it Green Street, and it is my title, is because Green Street Elite was based on 3 letters, GSE, which was my trade in the Royal Air Force. I was a General Technician Ground Support Equipment, Gen Tech GSE. So that's where the GSE comes from. There's lots of in-jokes in Green Street, some of which will remain forever secret. But to carry on, people were throwing money at her, and all of a sudden Green Street was going. And it all went a bit crazy then. And we started casting. They were talking about people in America, and we met Leo. We met him quite early on. He was nailed on as soon as we saw him. I think he was initially cast. There were talks initially about him playing Charlie Hunnam's character, but he ended up as Bovril, which is, I mean, it's typecasting. And then one day I'm in Tottenham Court Road, and I get a phone call. What do you think about Elijah Wood? And I said, for what? And they said, for Matt Buckner. I said, what, Hobbit in the movie? And they said, yeah, it'd be fucking awesome. And I said, oh yeah, it'd be fucking great. Sarcastically. Americans don't do sarcasm, as we know. And next thing I know, he's cast. So we are stuck. But, to be fair, he kind of nailed the part. There were things wrong with it that I still find difficult to watch. In fact, I've only seen Green Street 3 times in total. And that was it. We were off and running. And from that point on, for me personally, it started to get quite difficult, to the point where eventually I was banned off the set. But we'll talk about that maybe in a different video one day. But it's quite an interesting story. And there's lots more to come on Green Street as well. But again, that's all for another time. So that is how I landed the gig for Green Street. It's a curse and a blessing in equal measures. But I don't think I'd be here if I didn't have it on my resume. So there you go.